Hi everyone, Bethany Breath-Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Gene Dawson record, Chaos Now. This is a brand new LP from singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, multimedia artist, Mr. Gene Dawson, following up his breakthrough 2020 album, Pixel Bath, which was far from perfect but still showed a lot of volatile creativity on Gene's part, mashing together elements of punk rock and bedroom pop and hip-hop and R&B and lo-fi, emo music as well, and he mixed all these styles together into a series of very raw and catchy ragers. Maybe a little too small scale in terms of their sound and presentation, but still, the ideas and energy going into these tracks were very big. And now with Chaos Now, I feel like Gene's ambitions are grander. The bases covered on this thing are wider. Somehow, stylistically, Gene becomes even more difficult to pin down, while also sinking a lot of his efforts into these tracks that have almost a big alt-rock radio single type sound, which is something he couldn't sound more glorious pursuing. Now, I was a little skeptical going into this LP, because I wasn't super crazy about some of the singles. There's Three Heads, whose unique rap and rock fusion feels a bit off thanks to these random mellow detours and the very staccato riffs on the chorus that come off a bit too stiff. There's a lot of intriguing ideas going into this track, I just don't think there's a very coherent flow to them. Then Pirate Radio I found to, at first, be a pretty interesting change of pace for Gene, more of an acoustic vibe, and I think tonally it does fit as a closer for this record, but stylistically I just kind of saw this thing as just very plain as day indie folk, no more, no less, very derivative of Bon Iver. And for sure, it's cool to hear that Gene has the refinement to be able to pull something like this off, but did he put his own spin on it in the same way that he has many other genres thus far? Not really, in my opinion. But with that being said, there were a few other teasers on this thing I did enjoy quite a bit. There's Sick of It, which is handily one of the best reverb-soaked punk rock bangers that you're going to hear this year. It sounds like watching a neon-lit mosh pit at night in slow motion. It's aggressive, righteous, and rocketing off into space in 2 minutes flat. There's Bad Fruit, which is not just a very good ballad, but also more insight into Gene's talents for genre mashing, with more gentle indie folk guitars, elegant strings, which gradually ascend into this gorgeous display of instrumentation fit for a movie soundtrack. And then to top it all off, on the back end of the track, we have a really cool rap tie-in featuring Earl Sweatshirt. Earl comes through with some really dejected and personal lyrics and a melodic flow that really fits with the folk backdrop of the track. I'll also add, I think Gene has gotten more compelling as a lyricist too, as he laces the song with all of these cute, contrasting, and somewhat cryptic bits of imagery. I'm a tornado in the sunshine, the moon running from the sunrise. So yeah, there were singles on this thing that I liked, and I was even happier to hear that a majority of the deep cuts on here were pretty good too. There's the incredibly blunt Glory, which I found to be a totally kick-ass, dejected alt-rock anthem with an acoustic intro. Lots of lyrics where Gene is kind of embracing his own dysfunction and other people's perception of it. There's a crushing hook on the track as well, and Gene effectively does a great job of tapping into the really angsty and in-your-face simplicity of a lot of great 90s rock singles, which is also the case for the song Porn Acting too. But don't mistake these tracks as like simply an exercise in nostalgia, because there's enough digital effects and cool little weird modern details in there to where you'd never mistake it for something old. There's Kids Eat Pills, where Gene further embraces his weirdo status and sings about dreaming in dreams and escaping from a dream. Total dreamception over some heavy rock guitars and a lot of vocal distortion, plus a really cool uncredited feature from Isaiah Rashad where the guy sounds like my sleep paralysis demon spitting in my ear. Then Positive One, Negative One feels like a funkified fever dream with some smooth-ass riff passages bookended by lyrics from Gene where he's dreading what's going on upstairs. Like Three Heads, the flow of this track is a bit odd and choppy, but it still conjures a really interesting mental image and continues to play into these ongoing themes on the record where Gene is portrayed as kind of being at the edge of his mental state. There's a pretty great run of tracks in the midsection of the record too. We go from Bad Fruit to Zero Heroes, which showcases these heavy grungy guitars at the first leg, leading into this really shouty and tortured internal monologue from Gene, exploding into a harmonious hook that shows him just kind of wanting better and brighter days for himself. There's a super solid song structure on this one, an interesting rap tie-in on the bridge too, and from here we have a flawless transition into Screwface, which is another multifaceted but somewhat choppy cut, as the chaotic and very punky intro eventually gives way to these sort of woozy Mac DeMarco-esque guitars. And lyrically on this one, Gene focuses a lot on his upbringing, his background, and his ongoing mental state that sees him weaving in and out of this spiral. The hip-hop influences on this LP come out a little bit more in the last leg. There's Black Michael Jackson featuring George Clanton, where Gene does his thing over a pretty unique instrumental combination. There are some bent up and very expressive Modest Mouse-esque guitars on this thing, some G-funk synths popping up a little bit in the mix too, but not for too long, as the radical evolution of this track never really settles on one idea, which I think makes it hard for a lot of what's going on to truly set in, but I can still admire the track for being an incredibly unique series of sounds. Then there's Huh, which to me came off kind of like a young JPEG Mafia or even Donald Glover going wild over a lumbering heavy beat that's underscored by some Mike Dean-esque guitar harmonies, which, yeah, sounds weird, but actually comes off as being more epic than you might think. Though I think the outro passage is one of a handful of moments on this LP that proved to be a little awkward transition-wise. And I suppose that's my thing with the record. The execution, moving from section to section in a song, the combination of influences, it doesn't always come across as clean, but still a lot of what's going on here is a bold and unbridled show of creativity from a guy who clearly sees way fewer boundaries in the world of music than most do, which during some moments of this LP has its downsides in terms of focus and control, but simultaneously it also pays dividends in very bold and refreshing ideas across this thing. With this record, while I'm not in love with it, I think Gene Dawson continues to be one of the most interesting minds to peer into artistically in the underground, and if you're into any of the variety of genres that are going into this record, I highly recommend that you give it a try. I'm feeling a decent 2-strong 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Gene Dawson, forever.